Hello, and thank you for joining us today as we celebrate National Reading Month with the Teachers Roundtable. I'm Kim Diamond Berry, Director of Policy Grants in the Demonstration Preschool at HighScope, and I'll be your moderator. Our discussion today will focus on the following goals. So we really want you to learn a little bit more about the Bookvine for Children and the ways that this organization promotes literacy in young children. And we also would like for you to learn a little bit more about HighScope's Read-Aloud package and examples of topics and books that can be used to increase literacy and inspire reading in young children. I'd now like to introduce you to our panelists for today's event. We're extremely fortunate to have Amy Vandement, who is president of the Bookvine for Children, join us today. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Kim. Glad to be here.
So glad to have you here. And we're also happy to be joined by Sharon Wortley. And she is a preschool teacher in the demonstration preschool for Gretchen's House at HighScope. Welcome, Sharon. We're so glad that you're with us today.
Thank you, Kim. It's nice to be here.
Thank you. Well, let's get right to it. We're so excited that both of you are here today. We're going to start out with a poll question because we want to get all of our teachers and educators involved and engaged right from the start. And so we're going to begin, of course, we're talking, this is March, National Reading Month. And even though we know that reading is important for children all year round, we know that in the month of March, we're really shining the light on literacy and reading. And so we want to start off by asking you, what are you doing in your classroom to support National Reading Month? And what we're going to ask you to do is put your question, your responses in the chat, and we'll see what we come up with. And we see I think a lot of people are still joining. Sherry says she does a reading log. A lot of people are still joining. What are you doing to support reading? Kimberly Townsend says introducing new and diverse books. Tanya Berry says continuously introducing books to the children. What else are you doing to support reading this month and literacy? Nicole says she's introducing the children to a variety of new books. Favorite children's author and spotlights.
I like that one a lot.
I do too. Building small group activities off of books that we read at large group. Parents events, connecting reading, bringing parents into it. We're gonna have a parents roundtable later on. Oh, they're coming in now. Tanya also says she is reading to them and allowing them to read back.
It's a great practice.
I love some of these ideas. Shonda has mystery readers come in to read to the children.
That's a great one.
And Marcia is using art and drawings with the books, and we're going to talk about that too. A lot of these ideas are, I think we're gonna talk a little bit more about them with our webinar today. So this is good, having older students read to children. So a lot of wonderful, wonderful ways to support reading for children in the classroom.
Good engagement.
Yeah, great engagement. And so let's move on. And Amy, I'm going to ask you if you would share a little bit about the history of the Book Vine for children, who you are, and the mission of your organization.
Thank you, Kim. We're a
Thank you.
40-year-old independent woman-owned book business. And we have two jobs, really: reading the 3,000 children's picture books published each year. And we choose the best for our selections. And that's really our passion. And the second job is getting the word out about those books via presentations, trainings, conferences, and newsletters. And our belief is that reading to children, sharing books, is an act of nurturing. And it's a bond that's created when a teacher, educator, or caregiver shares a book with a child. This act says to the child, you are important.
Thank you, Amy. Sharon, would you share a little bit about yourself with us and your work? Because you've been doing this for a long time.
Yes, Kim. I've been in the field of early childhood for over 20 years. I've taught in tuition-based programs, state-funded programs, and also GSRP programs. That's what I'm presently doing with HighScope at Gretchen's house.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharon. Let's take a minute and talk about the reality of the life that we're all living right now. It has been about 2 years since we all closed down and, were informed that we were in a global pandemic, right? COVID-19 came 2 years ago and our whole world changed, and we had to really pivot, a lot of us, to doing online work. Some of us had to close our centers, and just, our lives changed in drastic ways. And we're still living in this pandemic now. And so, Amy, I'd like to ask you, how has the pandemic affected the Book Vine, and how you've been able to continue to elevate reading and literacy in your work with your customers?
Well, it's still affecting us, obviously, because like you said, it's still going on. And, supply chain issues have been a real opportunity for us. I think the most important thing we did was we stayed open and we stayed positive. We continued to sell books even during the time of the shutdown. We talked to administrators and teachers during that time, and we created YouTube videos. We have a YouTube channel. We read books to children who were at home so they could still enjoy books and listen to books. We did a lot of Zoom professional development literacy trainings, and we donated books so that children could get books in grab-and-go meals, both in New York, Chicago, and DC. So we're still remaining positive, still reading books.
Right. And I love that the idea that you gave books out with the grab-and-go meals for families, because it really speaks to the importance of sustenance that is needed, not only in our food and meals, but also the sustenance that we need in terms of reading and literacy to build young children's brains.
Books
So
nurture.
that's books nurture children. So it's so important. Thank you. Sharon, how did you handle the pandemic and really continuing to support children's reading and literacy and learning?
My co-teacher and I use Read-Aloud as one of the ways to maintain relationships with our families. We read a book daily and sent it through Core Advantage for our families. We weren't just simply reading, we were modeling for our families. We asked questions about the book and asked children to make predictions about what we have read. And one of the books that I read was Goose and the Loose. And at the end of the book, I said to the children, I want you to predict where the goose would land. And as a result, one of the families sent in a recording, the child retelling the story, and a picture of the goose that landed on the roof of her house. We wanted our families to know that they can do this with any book at home, that they can actually do this with.
Right. Thank you so much. And I love that example, because it really has to help the children use their imagination and really, and their language and emerging language in terms of thinking about what the book is about. So thank you so much for that. Amy, let's come back to you a little bit and talk about the Read-Aloud package and how it supports literacy for young children.
Well, this selection of books is pretty dynamic. And when I say that, I mean that this package of books does a lot of heavy lifting for the teacher. When the team was working on the book selection, there was a lot of dialogue about titles, and the goal was to assemble a variety of subjects. So there was support across multiple domains in the classroom. And I think you'll see that's pretty evident from the selection. And we always say that a good book has many layers, meaning that a book, being an intentionally designed piece of art, really, is multidimensional in its content. A book that is primarily about planting and growing may also extend to themes about community, supporting one another, and in turn, social emotional learning. So this group of books for the Let's Read It Again interactive read-alouds is a well-rounded set of high-quality children's books that makes story time engaging and rich.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Sharon, can you provide some examples of how you've used Read-Alouds to support literacy?
Read aloud with young children is actively engaging with them with the text. It's an important part of comprehensive language and literacy. When adults intentionally engage children in interactive process, Read Aloud can be the single most important activity for children's later reading success. In addition to the significant academic benefits that come with interactive Read Alouds, is an increase in children's vocabulary, listening, comprehension, background knowledge, and word recognition skills. Reading aloud with young children also fosters social interactions, a love of literacy, and a lifelong passion for reading.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. And now what we're going to do is to talk a little bit about some topics in literacy that can really help teachers and educators boost reading readiness among preschoolers and interest. And Amy, I'd like to start with you and talk a little bit about the social emotional area and how we can use some books to really boost that area in young children.
Sure. Well, a good picture book gives children a way to work out social emotional issues at a safe distance. As any teacher knows, a good picture book gives a child a platform to work out all of these emotional issues. And books about relationship skills like friendship, separation, anxiety, learning how to be empathetic, or even developing a sense of self-awareness helps children figure out how the world works. And of course, this works best when children are guided with open-ended questions from teachers or a caregiver. And on this list of 20 titles, about 8 of them have social emotional components. And so the title we're going to look at next would be Ruthie and the Not So Teeny Tiny Lie. This is by Laura Rankin. And in this book, Ruthie makes a choice. And she gets pretty creative with the truth. And eventually, she admits to what she's done, and there's an apology. But the important thing about this book is that, again, it provides many open-ended questions and talking points for classroom discussions. And it's a good book to talk about how we can make mistakes, forgive, and recover.
Yeah, and it gives children the opportunity to really think about some of the choices that they can make.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And now this one, Miss Bindergarten Gets Ready for Kindergarten. This title's been around for 25 years, and there's a reason for that. It has a very gentle way of showing children in 26 steps how to prepare, or in some cases, react for the first day of kindergarten. It's a rhyming alphabet book. And so in one book, you're handling not just social emotional hurdles and alphabet awareness, but also phonological awareness. And like any book read repeatedly, also ahead of a change of school, it's a tool to talk about fears, separation anxiety, and changes coming in a child's environment.
Miss Bindergarten gets ready for kindergarten. I think this is becoming my new favorite book.
You know, the funny thing about this book is that you might not know this, or you might, that the author and illustrator rarely meet one another to talk about illustrations. The editor selects the author, the illustrator for the author. And authors don't have much of a say about the choice of the illustrators. And I wonder in this case if Joseph Slate wrote this book with a dog in mind as the teacher, or was that Ashley Wolf's invention?
Right. And the whole idea of getting ready for kindergarten or getting ready for any transition is it's so key to supporting young children's social emotional development. And so I think this is really a great book to help support that and really look at that. Sharon, did you want to add anything before we go to a poll question again? We're going to get our audience involved again.
Now that the end of the school year is fast approaching, in our classroom, we're more looking towards books like these to help children in our programs move on to kindergarten. So this book, Mrs. Bindergarten, is a great one to add to any classroom collection.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. Thank you. And so we want to go back to our teachers and educators, and we're going to ask you to put your answers in the chat again. What is your favorite social emotional book, and how have you used it in your classroom with your children? And we'll just see what you all have been doing. You can put your answers in the chat. The Rabbit Listened, Kimberly.
That's a wonderful title.
Yes, Rainbow Fish, one of my favorites. Llama Llama Red Pajamas is another one. Sophie is a Star. When Sophie gets angry, really, really angry.
Classic by Molly Bang.
Yeah, that's a great one. When Sophie gets angry. Minosaur. It's another one. My Many Colored Days. Good Night, Gorilla. Today I Feel Silly. Some really great selections here to really look at social emotional development and support that. Llama Rojo Pajama. So that would be in Spanish. I Like Myself. Some great choices, great choices. The Schubert and Sophie series.
Oh, how am I peeling?
How am I peeling today?
Fruits
Fruits with the Moon. When I Get Frustrated. Great choices.
It's a lot of fun to see these titles.
Yes. Here's
Oh,
one in
Graciola.
Spanish.
Yes.
Orejas de
Spanish.
Mariposa.
Mm-hmm.
Tucker
Yeah,
Turtle. A Little
remember
Spot
to
series.
mention that we have the Spanish set too.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for sharing. How Do Dinosaurs Say Goodnight? The Color Monster. Some great choices here. Okay. Well, Amy, let's talk a little bit about the STEAM and STEM area, and how we can use STEAM and STEM in some of our books with children.
Okay. Like I mentioned before, a high quality children's book has many layers, and the best books are really intentionally designed. And a good STEAM book makes connections across disciplines or domains in the classroom. So nonfiction is really important because it builds general knowledge of the world. Science, books on science, art, math, they should all pique the curiosity and add new vocabulary to a child's word bank and build on what children already know. So it's important that STEAM or STEM books are engaging both in the language and the illustrations. And I just wanted to bring up the point about back matter. Teachers should look for back matter in nonfiction titles, and that information supports the teacher in their efforts to create a natural extension for the activities, or give the teacher more information or the ability to answer questions. And there are about 7 books on STEAM in the list of books in the Let's Read It Again package. And this is Up, Down, and Around, written by Catherine Ayers and illustrated by Nadine Bernard Westcott, a classic combo, of course. And if you're thinking of planting and growing, this book offers the perfect jumping off point for activities in the classroom. It also rhymes, it has rich language, provides plenty of positional words, and demonstrates that some crops grow above the ground and some crops grow below the ground. It's full of joy, and the illustrations show a lot of what really happens in the garden, from insects and how to harvest a vegetable. So it's very informational in the text and the illustration.
Yes, and I love this because I think this is the time, spring is sprung in most places, we'll say. Some places we're still back and forth with cold and warm, but the children are able to get out and start planning and looking at the different plants and even maybe doing something in the classroom. So that's an exciting time.
Yeah, this is 10 Black Dots by Donald Cruz, and published in 1968. This book is still engaging children because of the rhyming text and illustrations. And it reinforces counting, graphing, 10 frames, and creative ways to see numbers. And as you can see, it's redesigned. This page, I want you to notice how the question leads you. And this is really part of the pacing and design of a children's book. It leads you to turn to the next page. What can you do with 10 black dots? And it reinforces a visual number sense. It really begs for extension activities using dots and having children create their own pictures. And by giving children an opportunity to create something on their own, they need to choose how many dots they need, and they can explain their ideas, the number of dots used and why. It gives them a chance to play with numbers. And because of its bold illustrations, children can learn to visually group numbers and get a grip on grouping objects. And fish eyes. I can't resist talking about the amazing Lois Ehlert. And you all know she illustrated Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, but this book, Fish Eyes, is great for counting, number sense, color, and a great art book. Making collage in a classroom, whether out of scraps or cut paper, is really a great jumping off point.
And the colors are so inviting with particularly with Fish Eyes, but even with the counting book that you just talked about.
Irresistible.
Sharon, would you like to add any more thoughts about the STEAM and STEM before we move on to literacy and poetry?
Yes, Kim. STEM is a great way for children to explore their curiosity in a natural way. If we think about all the different math and science skills that we see preschoolers doing every day, such as putting out napkins, giving each child a napkin. That's one-to-one correspondence math. It could be adding water to snow and watching it melt. That's figuring out, that's science, drawing conclusion, and communicating ideas. STEM in the classroom, as teachers, we think that it takes a lot of work to do, but all it requires is teachers think of STEM learning as a mindset, encouraging children to use their scientific perspective in their play and helping them make sense of the world around them. I've used the different type of things we have used in our classroom is building a tower with all different size of blocks to see how well it will balance, growing seeds, sorting, playing with shapes, and mixing colors, mixing paint colors.
Thank you, Sharon. Now we're going to turn back to our audience again, and we want you to put in the chat another poll question we have for you. With spring fast approaching, and like we said, it's in some places, you know, spring may have already sprung, spring may just be coming to where you're located. What have you used in terms of STEM and STEAM in your work in the classroom with young children? And you can put your answers in the chat again, and we can kind of lift those up as you put them in there. Any STEM ideas? Inch by inch balancing act, mix it up. The children are planting, and we read the tiny seed. Yeah, so that's a big one. Forced bulbs is another one. Planting, we are reading up, down, and around. Jack and the Beanstalk, growing bean seeds, using art items to create a beanstalk. Wow. Nature walk when weather allows in Michigan. Yes, those of us in Michigan know that. Age appropriate planting, composing and preparing our playground garden. So there's a lot of planting and gardening and getting outside now, which is exciting. I think not only for the children, but for all of us, for those of us who have winter. The book One Bean as a starting for growing our own garden. Physical workout outside. And then Sherry has a real caterpillar in her class. Using 10 frames and creating a scavenger hunt for numbers. So many great ideas for STEM and STEAM and reinforcing that in young children. Using magnifiers and watching insects. Reading Sobre los Insectos.
Good.
Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. So Amy, let's move on and talk a little bit about literacy and poetry and how we can use literacy and poetry to support reading and literacy.
Okay. Well, rhyming poetry, like Mother Goose, who, in my opinion, needs to be revived as it helps children develop spoken language. So poetry, it builds phonemic awareness because it emphasizes sounds and the rhythm of words, and it's a foundation for future reading abilities. Rhyming poetry also helps children learn new words and play with words in a creative way. And I want to quote Mem Fox here. Rhymers will be readers. It's that simple. Experts in literacy and child development have discovered that if children know 8 nursery rhymes by heart, by the time they're 4, they'll usually be the best readers by the time they're 8. So more poetry, the rhyming, the rhythm, the prediction that comes from learning to rhyme helps in learning how to read. And this book, Here's a Little Poem, part of this set, is really a brilliant book because it has a child-centric index of poems in the back. And it's such a gift to a teacher who's looking for a poem to fit a theme. And the characters in these poems show many different emotions, and they can help children identify with their own emotions and those of others. Because when we see our own behaviors and characters, it's sometimes easier to see the effect they have on those around us. And there are poems to act out, poems to talk about, and it's really a way to encourage children to talk about their feelings. And we have the no-no bird in this collection, and everyone knows this feeling. So there's a lot to talk about here. And teachers can brainstorm or start a brainstorming session with the children by asking, what can you do instead of stamping, shouting, and crying?
I love the no-no bird. I really love the no-no bird. And I also love the fact that it really points up how, you know, we really look at it, can use different topics in different areas and how they overlap, because it's really, you know, even though we're talking about literacy and poetry right now, you know, it also is overlapping with the social emotional area that we just talked about.
Absolutely, the crossover.
Yes.
And this Recipe for Green is a perfect poem to accompany Up, Down, and Around. It has rich language, great concepts, and positional words. And this is a favorite. The rhyme and the rhythm keeps it moving. It's full of imagery, and you can clap along to the beat. And it's got some great, just great rich words, clickety-clack and thickety-thick.
Thank you, Amy. Sharon, would you like to add any thoughts about poetry and literacy in the classroom and some of the things that you've done?
Besides reading poems, we've engaged children in wordplay to further their understanding of language, such as helping children learn simple rhymes, asking rhyming questions. And these can be made up words or real words. It really doesn't matter as long as they're practicing rhyming. Rhyming, you can do introducing young children to poetry, helps their development, and most important, help them fall in love with words, increasing the chance they'll become enthusiastic readers, which we all know is key to success in school.
Yes, thank you. And Cindy wants to know what was the title of the poetry book. I think there were a few that we talked about, Amy, but
the title is Here's a Little Poem, and it contains the 3 slides that we showed. So it contains No-No Bird, the planting, and the rickety train ride.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Thank you. That was the one. Thank you. Sharon, let's move into the art area, and I'm going to start with you to talk a little bit about how we can use art and support literacy and reading.
We had read a book about astronauts, and one of the children was absolutely fascinated with astronauts, and we were exploring oil pastels. And this is the one that Zachary, he was fascinated about tornadoes. And so he had gone to the art area and he said, I'm going to make a tornado. And so this is his version of a tornado.
I love all of those colors.
And during Read Aloud, we had read Llama Llama, Mad at Mama. And this is Madison's version of a llama, which is great.
It's a very good llama.
It is.
And this is Caden. When he grows up, he wants to be an astronaut. And so this is him. This is his picture of an astronaut. And he got a book from the art area, and it had astronauts in it. And this is the books going with art. He looked through the book, found it. This is his version of an astronaut.
And it looks like it's in space too.
He does look
Yes.
like he's floating. Yeah.
Doesn't he? Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, and this is the one we we were exploring watercolors, and this little boy said he was really, really mad, and these colors are his mad colors.
Yeah, I see that.
Very emotive. He did a great job.
Yes, he did, and he told me right on it, I'm really mad, and so that's what. And and this is another child. We read a book about there's something in my pocket. And this is all the things that he said was in his pocket.
And there are a lot of things in his
There's
pocket,
a lot
it
of
looks
things.
like.
Yeah.
Inventive.
Yes, yes. Amy, can you talk a little bit about how art can be used in some of the titles of books that we can use with young children?
Absolutely. Well, the art in children's picture books is really the first art children come into contact with. So it's essential that it's great art. And, for very young children, the bolder and simpler the design is really important. And it's also important to remember that the illustrations aren't just there to sit beside the text. The illustrations invigorate the words, and they add to the story in ways the author never expected. And they really let you look beyond the words. This book, Charlie Parker Played Bebop. It's full of rhyme and fun. There's a lot to talk about, from the art to the subject to the text. And Chris Roshka, of course, has a really unique illustration style. And this book is a love letter to Charlie Parker's musical style. This text is full of onomatopoeia, and a picture walk before reading can help children pronounce the words and help them get engaged with the sounds too. And this is just wonderfully original, and it's a great way to introduce young children to jazz and have them react to the music by drawing along to music or moving their bodies. And The Important Book by Margaret Wise Brown, illustrated by Leonard Weisgard. This is an odd book, I'll admit it, but it's one of Margaret Wise Brown's best books. And, you ask why. Well, it speaks to children about ordinary objects and the attributes of those objects. It really increases general knowledge of the world. And if you're talking about artwork, if you look at these illustrations in the interior, they're beautiful, but then the language is rich and it paints a picture all on its own. And it's really easy to see the extensions in this book. Children can create their own descriptions of objects and what attributes make those objects whole. It really does build a descriptive language and a visual imagination.
Yes. I love the flowers in the important book, the one that you just talked about, especially with, yes, especially with spring. Mm-hmm. Thinking of spring. And so I think now we're going to move on to critical thinking and just spend a minute talking about how we can use critical thinking in terms of promoting literacy. Amy, would you like to kick us off there?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are two versions of the Three Little Pigs in the set, and I think it's an unusual choice, but it does give you a deeper appreciation of the story. And the one that we're looking at is the Marshall version, which is different than the traditional version. It's a little juicier and more interesting. And it really is an opportunity to talk to children about kind of the bigger concepts. And asking these kind of questions help children perceive, analyze, predict, and draw a conclusion. For example, like the question, is it better to be bigger or is it better to be smarter? And these elements are key to strengthening critical thinking skills. What great pigs. The illustrations are rich, they are full of objects to talk about.
Sharon, would you like to add a few thoughts about critical thinking?
Yes, Kim. As we all know, books play a vital role in children's social and academic development. Reading stimulates the mind, sparks the imagination, and heightens awareness. And with young children, exposing them to many different types of book is essential for their development. An example of critical thinking, like we did the other day, was The Cat in the Hat. The children let the cat in the house without their parents being there. They had to think about that. Was that a good idea or not? Then they had to think about, they had to elevate. Was that a good thing? And then they had to think about, is this true or is it not? Or is it made up?
Yes. Thank you, Sharon. And you know, as you all are speaking, it occurs to me that, you know, even though we kind of separated the topical areas out, we talked a little bit about how some of them overlap. And I think when we think about critical thinking really, I think is embodied and encompassed in all of the topical areas in one way or another. So I think we, you know, we can kind of think about it in both ways as sort of an umbrella sort of topic or topical area that we can use, but we can separate it out too. So I think that's important to just raise up. Let's move on to our final question, and then, you know, of course, we're going to open it up to the rest of our audience to see what questions you might have. I would like for you both to talk a little bit about the importance of finding joy in reading for teachers as well as for young children. And Sharon, I'm going to begin with you. How do you find joy in reading?
How do I find joy in reading? Like if I'm really stressed or anything, one of the things that really do calm me down, because I travel a lot, so, and I'm always thinking on the plane. So every time I go somewhere, I've always got a good book, good book to read on the plane. And modeling good reading is a great habit. So if children see you reading, they will want to be readers. Reading together with children, reading aloud, bring words to life, talking about the book, asking questions, what do you think will happen next? Also, getting a library card. Most communities offer free library cards. Keeping books around. If they're in our classroom, we have books in every area. Even if a child just picks it up for a few minutes, they're looking at books.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Amy, how do you find joy in reading?
Well, I just wanted to point to Sharon's idea that she always has a book with her. And I think in this technological age, always having a book or a magazine with you is key and modeling to children. You know, I was asking for tips on how to make my 24-year-old read some more. He saw me reading all his life and is not a reader anymore. So if anybody has a tip for me, let me know. But seriously, if you look behind me, those are the books that I read on a daily basis, keeping up with all the new books, but also reminding teachers to find books that they love that bring them joy in the classroom. Because if you love a book, it's going to come through to the children when you read it. They're going to know which books you like and which books they don't. So keeping that joy alive, and it's really the curiosity and the wonder of the world.
Yes, thank you, Amy. And for me, I have a 10-year-old, almost 11-year-old that I'm trying to make sure he gets his 20 to 30 minutes in every day. So I think the idea of modeling that reading and young children seeing us read is a really important concept. And just reading for me takes me to a different place, and I get to imagine, and so just kind of raising that up in children is a wonderful thing, I think. Well, we certainly want to give a big thank you to our panelists, Amy and Sharon, for being a part of this very, very important, valuable discussion and elevating literacy in young children. We've learned so much from both of you, so we thank you again for your time and for sharing your thoughts and ideas about reading and literacy. Now we would like to hear from our listeners as we move into our participant question and answer portion of this discussion. So please type any questions that you have into the Q&A box, and we will get to as many as we can, or you know, place them in the chat, if you will. And let's see. We can start off with, I have a few here. But just if you have questions, please put them into the chat or put them into the Q&A box. So here's a question. In this climate of handling change, and we talked a little bit about that with how we've all had to live with a lot of change over the last 2 years. Sometimes on a day-to-day basis, what children's books bring you reassurance or joy? And Amy, would you like to start us off?
You know, The Rabbit Listens, someone brought that book up. I think that's a wonderful book to read to children, and use as a resource for adults too, in reminding them that sometimes children just need a good listener.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sharon?
Mine is the anything from Dr. Seuss, because there's always a good ending to them.
Yeah.
It's always positive.
Yeah. And Dr. Seuss, there's also, we talked about rhyming and rhythm, and there's a lot of rhyming and rhythm in Dr. Seuss's books. So here's another question. What new children's picture books have you discovered in the last year and that have become your favorites? Sharon, would you like to go?
I just discovered this one. I found it in our library. It's called it's a feelings book, and it's called On Monday When It Rained. And you know, that's going to come in and it's actual black and white photos of this child, how he's feeling when he couldn't go outside to play because it was raining.
Okay.
That's a classic. I think it's from the early 80s.
Yes, but you know, the children really enjoyed it. I did too. That's becoming one of my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And Amy, I think someone wanted to know the last book that you just mentioned.
Oh, it was The Rabbit Listened by Corey Dorfeld.
Okay. The Rabbit Listened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And I think we had another, well, it was a comment from Shelley that children, a great comment, children should be exposed to other forms of literature such as magazines and newspapers. She says her son would only read magazines and the dictionary, and now as an adult he reads books. Yes, yes, that's a great point. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Here's another question. Teachers find value in authors' studies. If you had to select one author with multiple titles, which are enduring favorites, who would it be? And Amy, why don't you take that one?
You know, Karen Beaumont was a great author. She's still alive, I shouldn't say was, but David Catro illustrated a lot of the books that she wrote, like I Ain't Gonna Paint No More and Stand Tall, Molly Lou Mellon. A lot of really positive messaging in those books, but with humor and with rhyme. So I think, you know, she's a real favorite. And I don't know a lot of people who, you know, would follow her work history or her oeuvre, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Sharon, do you have any favorites?
I'm going to piggyback off Amy. I Ain't Gonna Paint No More has been such a big hit in the class, and we've had to get several of that one book because of the rhyming, and then at the end they love making up, thinking what is it, and they love making up their own rhymes. So that's one of that ones, and my favorites begin to be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And Cindy Palmer wrote that she loves watching kids reading cookbooks in the house area. Yeah, so that's another great idea. Okay. Well, this has been just a wonderful time just talking about raising literacy and reading in young children. And so I'd really like to thank our panelists and our participants for such a lively discussion. It looks like we have one more question here from Graciela, I believe it is. Let's see here. She wanted to know, let's see. I'm looking here. I think she wanted to know the name of one of the books that Amy, she wanted to, Amy, could you repeat the last name of the author?
Yes, it's Beaumont, Beaumont. Hi, Graciela.
Okay, thank you. So we've received a lot of great information and examples of how to promote literacy and reading in young children. And again, thank you, Amy and Sharon, for your conversation and for just sharing all of your knowledge in this area. A certificate of attendance will be emailed to attendees 24 hours after this webinar, and a recording will be posted on HighScope's blog, The Playground at HighScope. We're hosting a second webinar on March 30th that is geared towards parents. A parents roundtable will talk about the ways families can add literacy to their home and what types of books to add to build the home library. We encourage you to invite the parents to come and participate in this session. Come and join the roundtable as educators and teachers will share their excitement about reading, offer literacy tools of the trade, and discuss the importance of building reading and literacy skills in young children. And the registration is open now at highscope.org. Celebrate National Reading Month. Registration is now open also for HighScope's 50th International Conference. The 2022 HighScope International Conference will be a hybrid event, allowing you to choose to attend in person in Detroit, Michigan, or virtually. And of course, it will make it more accessible than ever before to learn from early childhood experts like Amy from the Bookvine, who will be presenting and exhibiting at the conference. Yay, Amy. The early bird rate expires soon. Explore more at highscope.org/international conference. Thank you again for joining us today.